Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed lunch and the roundtable discussions. My name is Dr. Lisa Cain. I am an associate professor with the Chaplin School of Hospitality and Tourism Management, and it is my privilege and pleasure to introduce the panel today on the intersection of experience and technology. I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves, so David, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Hi, everyone. Great to meet you all. I'm David. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Duve. Duve is a guest management platform for digital solutions for hotels. That's me.
Hello, my name is Patrick Huey. Can you hear me? Okay, I can't hear my voice, so I trust you can hear me. I'm the GM of a resort in Desert Hot Springs called We Care Spa Wellness Center. We do fasting. So you come for 7, 12, 14 days and you do not eat, but we keep you hydrated with supplements and protein shakes. You're there for 14 days. We are all about wellness and resetting your spirit, your mind, and your body. And I'm also the chair of the board of the International Spa Association and many other things, but that's me.
Excellent. Thank you. My name is Stephen Davis. Happy to be here. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Integrated Insight. We're a boutique analytics firm where we support predominantly the hotel, leisure, tourism, hospitality sector. We do consumer insights, research, new business development, pricing, revenue strategy, a little bit of all of it. And I'm excited to be here today with all of you.
Thank you so much, Stephen, Patrick, David. So let's get started with today's discussion. Stephen, let's start with you. When you begin to think about integrating technology to the experience, where do you start?
Yeah, great question. I think what I'd say is you want to start the same place you want to start everything that you do from a hospitality standpoint is you want to lead with your consumer, lead with your guest, whether you're doing revenue strategy or marketing strategy. All of that should start with your guest, which I think is intuitive for a lot of us in the hospitality industry, but it doesn't always come through in technology. It's easy to get in a room, you've got a lot of sexy things thrown at you, you got a lot of fun ideas, but how do you think about your guest first? What do they not only just need, but how do they want to be taken care of? And if you start there, that's really a winning proposition for getting to the right technology in place.
That's fantastic. Patrick, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think, I'm thinking specifically about how, I know there's a lot of talk about wellness and well-being that has happened on this stage today, which I think is great. And I think as you're talking about what that experience is, I look at my situation in particular where a guest who has not eaten in 4 days may not be the most tech-savvy person, right? I can't tell you the number of calls I get because they can't work the remote in their room. And I'm like, you just press the button and the TV comes on. That's to say, to highlight what you're saying, Steve, is that I think you have to have an approach to how you build your experience and make sure that whatever pieces you're adding in makes sense for the business that you have. And I think also, if you're thinking about, does the experience make sense and the technology, I'm looking at it also from a back-of-house perspective, where many hotels are still not using proper CRM systems. And things are still done manually in a lot of hotels. And so do you have the right solution to make even the back-of-house pieces work from an employee experience also?
I think that's really important to consider. And I think that building off of that starting point, I'm wondering how technology can be used to enhance the human-to-human interaction, and obviously particularly in a luxury experience. Can technology itself be part of the experience, or should it make the in-person experience more seamless? David, let's start with you.
That's a great question. We think that the technology should be very seamless. Okay, it should be very easy to use. No one needs to think about it, about are we using technology, what are we doing right now? And I have a story. We have a very high-end hotel in Paris that he joined Duve about a year ago. And when we asked him, okay, how things are going, how are you using our platform, he said that the most important thing for him is that because he has a very limited time with every guest. When the guest arrives to the hotel, you have about 8 minutes, 10 minutes of patience for the guest to talk to you. So you want to make the best usage of that time. And you want to get rid of the bureaucracy before the guest arrives. All the scanning the passport, paying for stay, collecting the information. So this is what he was most looking for in a solution that managed the guest experience and communication before arrival, collecting all the information, and how we can really make the best usage of that 10 minutes. That's a great usage of technology that really elevating the human-to-human interface, and I think that's the basic. But besides that, the technology can pretty much, when it's usage correctly, it can elevate the entire guest journey, elevate the human-to-human, but also the human-to-technology. It's not human-to-technology, okay? It's human-to-guest value, and if you do it correctly, it's very easy and seamless.
I love that. Human to guest value, I think, is a really powerful phrase, first and foremost, but it also sort of bridges the two important components of our industry, which is that human to human interaction and then that experience elevation that we're looking to leverage the use of technology for. So thank you so much for sharing that. Did either of you gentlemen want to elaborate maybe on how your businesses are enhancing guest experience and the human to human interaction with technology?
We are actually looking to add in more technology. So for instance, if a person calls our resort to book a stay with us, they're booking a 7-night stay, everything now is done manually. So we have to get them on the phone, we have to text them, we have to email them, we have to beg them to respond to us so that we can build their entire journey. Because it's not just booking a room, it's booking your colonics, it's booking your spa services, it's booking your healing services, and there's a lot of discussion that has to go on, particularly when we're onboarding a new guest. It's a very labor-intensive exercise. And so we are looking at ways now, and we're going to be speaking to Duve, of how we can allow the guests to do that on their own time, which if they can navigate the system on their own and pick what works for them and reduce the amount of chasing back and forth and missed calls and emails and voicemails that we have, it improves the guest experience. Because what happens when we go back and forth is they get very frustrated. We want to reduce, someone said friction points earlier, and so for me, a system like Duve, or any system that can help reduce the friction points, it's really important for me. And that's how I view technology in general. It has to reduce the friction points that the guest feels in my particular, wherever I am working. So that's how I look at it. How can I use the technology to make it easier, more convenient for the guest?
And you're putting that personalization now in their hands,
Right.
Right? And so they have more control over that,
Right.
which is great.
Absolutely.
It's even behind that, it's just because the experience starts at their home before they arrive to your resort. So they have like more time that they spend and think about what they're going to experience, how they will make the best usage. They're getting more excited and much more engaged. It's a lot about the engagement and planning and being more aware of the local discovery and what they can do during their stay. I think that it will enable them at the end to have a better experience, a better stay, to be more smart about it and book in advance. There's a lot of value that technology.
Because I want the technology to help them get to the human connection. So let's have your phone open your door. Let's have the robot maybe bring the room service to your door, whatever the thing may be. But I want to be able to still get to the point where I'm talking to somebody, right? I think particularly in a luxury model, it's not about disassociating the guest from the human experience. And I think that's come up a lot today as well, is that the technology has to serve the human connection. We're people. And I think even now we've had, 2 years of being so far removed from each other, and Zoom and whatever platform you use to talk to people on. I think the human interaction is valuable, and the technology has to help drive that. It's not in lieu of, it's to help you get there faster.
But to add on to one of the things that David said that I think is really interesting is that this pre-planning exercise that guests are doing, there is a business benefit to that as well. So we do a ton of research talking to tourists and travelers. People don't add things once they show up to their destination, they only remove them. So the more things that you can get them to do at your property and plan those in advance, That's per cap that's already in the bank, right? And so I think it not only allows them to have that personalization, you take the friction points away, but there's a business case to be made that you can capture that spend before they show up, and now they're already more engaged with you as they think about what are they going to do when they reach this destination.
I think that's fantastic. And there's the infamous saying or famous saying, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. And the first impression really is before they get to the destination. So leveraging the technology to reduce those friction points really is pivotal for success. And thank you for sharing the statistical information as well. I think that's really, really helpful to just demonstrate sort of consumer behavior and how we can leverage that to give them a better experience and also make it profitable for the business. Our next question is, how do luxury customers perceive interactions with robots and technology in the luxury setting? We do have some fabulous robots over next door that we've been able to interact with today. Do they perceive it as a solution to labor issues or an additional amenity? Patrick, do you want to field this one?
Sure. So I have an anecdote. So I was in Boston last year, and I was talking to a gentleman who is a religious professor at Dartmouth College, and he had been brought in, at MIT, I believe. They've already built the technology to have robots look, sound, and talk like people. And so what they've done is they've brought in the ethicists to discuss, should we or should we not do this thing? And how do you distinguish in the population a robot that looks like a person from a person? And so I think it is quite an interesting question that you ask, because conceivably a robot who looked like me could be standing at a desk at a hotel checking you in, and you, the consumer, may have you would probably know that it's not a person, but you may not have a real understanding of what it may not impact the guest experience. And what they're teaching the robots to do is learn human emotion through the face. What's complicated is they've only done it on Caucasian skin, so Asian people, black people, people who are not Caucasian, they don't read the emotion as well. So they're trying to overcome that hurdle. I don't know, the answer is I don't know, but the future is now because the technology is already there. What we're working on is, does it financially makes sense? From a labor perspective, yes, because we don't have enough people. And if I can have the check-in person be a computer who doesn't have to have a break, won't form a union, all those things, I think that's really an interesting thing. But then you get into all of the sort of matrix questions that come up when you talk about that. But I think we're moving there. I think it's inevitable. I don't think we're not going to put the genie back in the bottle.
I agree with you. And the ethical question is certainly one that we all need to strongly consider. But Stephen, you and I were talking before the panel about sort of labor replacement versus labor enhancement and how robots and technology might serve that role.
Yeah, I certainly think when you talked about where do you want to start, I'd say where you don't want to start is the notion that this technology is going to replace labor. Now, we're in an interesting position right now where there's a labor shortage within our industry, so it can help to supplement that. At some point, that's going to normalize. So I think it's important to think about it as a way to kind of facilitate some of the transactional so that those transactions become interactions, right? And so now you've given them more space to then, they're around the concierge desk, right? So if I can have a really well-run web app that allows me to book a reservation on property for food and beverage, dinner reservation, okay, great. Well, that takes a little bit of capacity then, well, it takes a little bit of the bandwidth away from the concierge normally. Now I've given that back to them. So I think there's the ability to leverage it, to help to supplement labor, to help to support labor, not to replace it. It's to then give those people more power and more autonomy to have those better human-to-human interactions that are so important in a luxury setting.
Yeah, I would just add to that, first of all, I think that most of the guests, they don't think, is it an answer to a labor shortage? Is it to make my stay better? They see what technology is offering them at that specific point and see if it makes sense to them. Okay, if someone sends them an automated message 3 days before arrival, inviting them to check in and skip the line, it's an easy choice. If I have time now, I would do it. It doesn't think, oh, now they're replacing a human-to-human interaction. And the second thing, it really depends on the persona. okay? Because you have those millennials or Gen Z that their basic reaction, or what they want to do, they want to use the mobile phone for everything. They mentioned it in the, I think in the panel at 11 about the luxury guest experience, that they don't want to talk to anyone. They want everything to be available for them 24/7, and this is what they are used to. And when you don't offer it to them, it's just weird for them. And it's a huge friction point if they need to call the reception or if they need to stand them online or wait 40 minutes. And those are the travelers that this is what is growing, okay, right? Those young, this is the next generation that is coming to all those resorts. And you have to adapt. But you have to adapt that some people, it's not relevant for them. Some customers, some guests, they want to come and talk to human. They want their time with the concierge or the front desk. So you have to offer both. Well, you need to offer both. But again, you need to adjust it and bring the seamless value to your guests. I think that's the main point.
I agree. I think that goes back to our second question, which is how we can facilitate those human-to-human interactions and then alleviate the friction points. And
But is it also, I think the challenge for the operator is, where's the line? Because a millennial or a Gen Z person may want to do everything on their phone until the Wi-Fi goes down. And then you're stuck if you don't have trained staff who understand the product.
Yeah.
I think that's where we get into sort of the rub for operators, is that you want to have all of these pieces in place that work for you, but you still have to be able to be prepared for the moment when it stops working, because we know it never works all the time.
Yeah.
And then how do you handle that? So it's not a gray area, but it's an area that requires, I think we can get ahead of ourselves and say, well, let's just make it all technology. It doesn't always work like that, and people at some point still need to have that connection. And you have to remember, the person sitting with the concierge, they're booking to go see the last show of Phantom of the Opera or whatever, but they're also building a relationship with that person that's going to tie them back into your brand. And how does technology do that? Tie them back to your brand.
Yeah, I think it's the notion of we're not at a point where you want to make it mandatory, essentially, I think is the answer, right? It's not mandatory, because there's going to be a guest who says, no way, I'm not going to do that, and you're going to lose me, and my experience is immediately degraded because you forced me into this mode, right? I think that not mandatory is probably the important point.
I think that's a perfect transition, actually, into our next question. How can tech seamlessly support the elevated guest experience that is expected in the moment? And I mean, we've heard this word bandied about all day, which is personalization or customization, right? So knowing when you have the millennial guest who wants to get all the text notifications, and knowing when you have someone who wants something a little bit more personal and interactional.
Yeah, personalization is really, I think it's the base of the future technology, because you have so many different kind of guests that arrive into your resort, and you want, usually you have some sort of clues about who's the guest, or you can ask them some questions and then understand really who's the guest, and then you can really customize and have a very personalized guest journey that is automated, and you can have like 20 or 30 or 50 different automated personalized guest journeys based on the feedback that you get from the guest. If they have kids in the reservation, if they come to business, if they come to leisure, if they mention that they want spa service or they came for hiking. So you know your guest, you know the personas that comes to you, and then when you have that information, technology just enable you to use that information, and again, seamlessly based on the persona to offer more value to every guest, and enhance their total experience. That affects on so many different parts. Like you mentioned, how you want more engagement, right, with every guest. So some of it is manually, but when you build the perfect guest journey as you see it, as the CEO of the general manager of the resort, you can duplicate yourself. You can have like 20 that manages all your guests. Of course, some guests are different. Some guests will say, hell no, I don't want that, okay? I want to see Patrick, I want to talk to Patrick. But maybe 70% will say, wow, cool, I got all the information, all the value I wanted from Patrick. And as we progress, more and more solutions will enable you to offer more and more value to every guest that comes to you.
And we're at a time, too, when the consumer base is so broad. So you have to almost have a solution for where each person is. It's the challenge of managing teams now, is that in the workforce, you'll have people who are 75 and people who are 16. And what they need from you is very different as a leader, but what they expect from you in terms of technology and access and ability to be facile around technology is very different. So it puts more onus on the operator, on the business, to really be flexible and facile in an environment that's forever changing as people live longer and people come to work earlier and they work longer. So it's a really interesting, we don't know the answer now. Maybe in 50 years we'll look back and go, oh, there's the trend. But it's a really interesting topic, I think, and how we manage it.
Well, I think one of the things you think about elevated experience in technology, and we talked about it doesn't always work, right? And so how do you handle those situations where it breaks down? One of the things that we've seen interestingly actually in practice is that guests who have a bad experience with technology but then have a great experience with a human where that's troubleshooted, they get it, and they get the outcome they want, they actually will rate you higher, give you a better Net Promoter Score than someone who had no issues with the technology. And so you can turn those issues into moments. And so how do you create the right staff? How do you create that part of your operational plan to say, well, when it breaks, what do we do? Being able to have a proactive kind of engagement with them to bring them back in.
I think that's really important. And I think also just going back to what David and Patrick were saying as well, particularly you, David, if you think about the guest folio and you have all of this information, you can use the technology to upsell, right? It can give send suggestive text messages to your guests. Would you like to have a spa treatment today? We have an opening at X. And sometimes because you know the guest experience that you can provide, obviously better than any guest does coming into your property, it grants you that opportunity to say, this person, last time they were here, ordered X, Y, and Z, so let's suggest those again and then tack on the next few services because they didn't get to experience that. So I think that personalization and the ability to leverage it to upsell from before they even get there to then when they're on property is really an invaluable tool that we might see take hold in the luxury segment going forward and possibly now. How much does novelty of the technology play a role in deciding whether or not to provide the technology above functionality, so that sort of wow factor that the technology provides?
So what I'd say is that certainly there's elements of technology that are novel and people have fun, right? Kids love it when the robot comes to the room and gives them a pillow. Mom, we need one more pillow. Tell it to come back, right? They love it. I think what's important to think about, though, is that it has to function. So anything that is functional can be made experiential, but not everything you make experiential functions, right? So you've got to start with the function, lay the experience over on top of it. I think the novelty aspect is certainly there. At some point that wears off, right? So you got to think about the life cycle of this type of technology. But novelty is great, it's wonderful, just make sure it works, because that's going to be, everything fails in execution, right? So, yeah.
Although then it does provide the opportunity for the housekeeper to come bring the pillows and wow with the human-to-human interaction.
Yeah,
so
well, robots can't build towel animals, you know, so until they build one the towel animals on the bed, you still got use for that.
That is true. So we talked about this a little bit, but we do have not just a multi-generational workforce, but obviously a multi-generational clientele these days. And so what does technology implementation look like across the generations? There's such a vast experience with, boomers versus obviously Gen Z, in Gen Z being digital natives. They've never not known a cell phone or a computer, and boomers who may be reluctant to do anything other than use the landline. So I'm stereotyping, I'm sorry if there's any.
It's okay, it's a safe space.
So how do we manage technology across the generations in the luxury setting?
I think we mentioned a bit before, you need to be persona-based. So maybe you want that the boomer will have a shortage experience in the digital. But I think that today, pretty much everyone uses their smartphone, right? Everyone has a smartphone. It's not like 15 years ago. So everyone is pretty much used to use digital solutions. Now, after the pandemic, everyone got interacted with Zoom. Okay, everyone is doing video phone calls that didn't exist about 3 years ago. So I think that today it's maybe a blocker about how people think about technology. Will it be suitable to all of my guests? So it will be suitable for most of your guests for sure. But like you mentioned before, you need to have that solution for the people that don't want to use the technology, or they will have some issues with technology, but it will be a very small part of your guests, and the value that you can bring to them, that we also mentioned before. It's not only the upsells. It's not only upsells inside of the hotel. You can use the technology to do the local discovery outside of the hotel before they arrive. Okay, so they come for you. Don't sell them just a place to sleep. Sell them an experience and a holistic solution about what they will do outside of your hotel, where to travel, maybe already pre-book their tickets or tours, and with their airport transfer, they take them directly to you. And when you have technology, it's much easier to connect to the local community, to connect to the local suppliers, and bring value to the local community, bring value to your guests. Again, reduce the friction. It just makes sense. And I think this is a key part about how this industry will be in the next 10 years, offering a lot more of that experience and not just a place to sleep.
That's interesting because what you're enabling is you're leveraging technology to be able to create authenticity, right? Which you may not always tie those two things together. And that's a trend that we see certainly in the industry. I don't want just place to stay. I want to feel ingrained in the local culture. I want an authentic experience. I don't want it to be fabricated. So that's a really interesting way to think about. You don't really think about technology and authenticity at the same time, but there's a way to really build them into the culture before they show up.
Yeah, and this is something that is very relevant to the hotels, to the hoteliers, because when the guest needs to find by themselves what to do, they will go to TripAdvisor, to the social medias, Facebook, Instagram. They'll go to Google Maps or Google, and they will need to walk, and they get not the authenticity, they don't know. They go to solutions that are generic and find what to do. But when the hotelier add their local solutions or local recommendations to a tech solution, but this is what we are using, the reputation of the hotels, of the hotelier, to offer what they think that is most relevant to their guests. So you create whatever you think that bring value and will help your guests have a great experience, an authentic experience, but it's very localized because the hotelier built it inside of the tech system and not just forward you to search in search engines or social media, etc.
Yeah, best restaurant recommendations always come from the guy at the door.
Exactly.
Right? It's always, not Google. Yeah, absolutely.
Also think too, I think we have, so for instance, we know it's hard sometimes to find housekeepers in markets. It's a very difficult job. It's a labor-intensive job. The pay is not at the top of the pay scale, so it's sometimes hard to find housekeepers. So most people are comfortable with the idea of a Roomba cleaning their living room, right? It wouldn't surprise you if you walk to someone's home and there's a Roomba doing the floor. So if I'm thinking about technology from just a real, like what makes sense from a business perspective, not from a ideation perspective, I would have in my hotel, I would have no problem, and I think my guest would be fine if a robot showed up to mop the floors in their room. Because we have a vocabulary for that within our day-to-day life now. And I think when I think about technology in just real terms, like I got to go to the owners and ask for, $1 million investment in something, I think for me, what gets over the line are the things that are familiar to people in their lives already, that they can understand what that is. I think a robot standing at the front desk checking people in might be strange for people because we haven't crossed that threshold in most of our lives at this point. So I think we have to make choices around technology that are really reflective of what's familiar to people, which can help bridge what grandma experiences versus what the grandchild experiences. Because there are things that we all are used to. I mean, I don't think people freak out anymore if you go to a restaurant and there's a QR code and you snap that and the menu comes up. Because we're now used to that vocabulary. So for me, it's what's in the vernacular now, what can be implemented without a lot of explanation, and still allows for there to be a human-to-human, person-to-person connection.
I would just jump on the $1 million. Okay, I just want people to know that today technology is very cheap. Okay, okay, it's software solutions, not hardware. Hardware, maybe robots, something else.
Yeah.
But software solutions, it just makes economic sense. Okay, today you don't need to develop your. It never makes sense to develop your own software. Okay, it always makes sense to buy or use someone else's solution because it's just very easy to implement. Okay, everything is cloud-based, everything is mobile-first. So things that were very expensive, let's say 10 or 15 years ago, when you needed to install on-prem PMS,
Right.
so it's a
Right.
completely different story today when everything sits on Amazon or Google or etc.
Yes. Yes.
You know, I think that's a perfect segue because there are all of these technologies and you can have the Roomba in the room, although there might be functionality issues if you have too many things laying around because your kids are also there or just whomever. But there's also this prevalence of Alexas being in the room as well and other technology. And so Bianca McKell asks, our hotel exists in a very security-concerned environment. About 50% of our guests are happy to use tech to facilitate their visit, but still 50% are afraid of entering data online and refuse to use online check-in. If half of the guests are skipping the online flow, how do you handle needing to supply two types of staff?
You just have to. That's the price of doing business. And I think the theft of identity is a very real concern for people. And maybe thumbs up, and maybe it becomes, I watch the airlines a lot because I feel like they have to be very sort of forward-thinking about safety and technology. So it's no big deal if you go to like Delta, whatever it's called, the clear thing, and they scan your eyes to get in. We don't think twice about it. And I think, again, as these technologies enter into other areas of our lives, it becomes much more adaptable for us. But her name is Bianca.
Bianca, yes.
Bianca, you have to do both. I don't know if you're there or here, but you have to be prepared to do both. Because people, even now we have people at our hotel, and the rates are $1,000 a night to be there. They'll say, I'll bring you cash, even today. And I'm like, you're here for a week. We can't take that to the bank. Like they think we're running drugs or something. So, you have to be flexible. This is not prescriptive. And we're in a time of major transition around all of this because we know where it's going. We're sitting here with people who work in this world, so we know where it's going. But you have to lead people there. You just can't go like, okay, there you go, no choice. We're not there yet. But I think in the interregnum, you're going to have to be able to talk. And you said that earlier. You have to build it to match what the business needs and those different options you have to have.
Yeah, and there are known issues. So you have standards that you need to find with the companies that you work. You have the ISO, you have the SOC 2, GDPR, you have all those regulations that every company must work with them in order to not have that issue, okay? So today so you have more people that are afraid, but when you bring them more and more value, as years go by, more and more will start to use and trust, okay? It's a lot about trust.
It's a trust issue.
It's a trust issue.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that my mother trusts less than me in technology, but all the time I get screenshots about, is this real? Should I put my information here? Can I put my information here?
Yeah.
And all the time I need to tell her, yes, no. Sometimes, do you have scams? But So you need to build that trust. You can use some logos, you can use some icons, but if you, as you progress, at the end, this is where we are going forward.
I think it's also all about how we frame why the technology is being used, right? Because in the airport setting, it's for your safety.
Right.
It's not for the airport's
Right.
usage. It's for your safety because they don't want anybody else to harm you, so they need to know who you are and make sure you're in a safe environment. We don't want to think about coming to a hotel, especially not a luxury hotel, and having to worry about various characters who may, have ill will. So coming here or to another luxury resort and having to have your eyes scanned before you come in to make sure you're not a bad actor is probably more unsettling to people than it is comforting.
Yeah.
And so it's also the function of the technology and what that sort of represents that I think is important to consider also. Kate Schoof asks, what are the top 2 to 3 technologies that your guests have asked for? And I think we only have one.
Let's talk to Patrick, who operates.
Oh my goodness. The whole pre-booking piece, which we, like I said earlier, it's very human-heavy interaction, which is great because you can tell the story. People want to work on their own time, especially when you're talking international guests, different time zones, et cetera. They really, really want that. And I wasn't kidding about the machine, the robot to clean the guest rooms. I think that, again, my staff has to go home at a certain point. So if you want service at 10 o'clock at night, we're going to give you service at 10 o'clock at night, which means there's a housekeeper who's staying there. If I could replace that with the robot that could come in and make sure your floors are clean, they can't fold your towels and make, giraffes or whatever. But if I could have that, that would make them very happy because, again, we're in the desert. There's sand everywhere. And that's the biggest thing that people don't want is if you're in a beach or a desert, there's just sand all on the floor. They want that swept up. So I think, to me, that would be huge from an operational standpoint. I think, and I think things like, let's all have the key on our phone at our hotels, please. The lost keys, the thing got demagnetized by my credit card. It's so much time and frustration for the guests to walk all the way back to the reception desk to get their key remade. Things like that to me are like just no-brainers at this point.
The little friction points.
The little friction points.
The little friction points.
It's death by 1,000 cuts for a hotel. It's like the key didn't work, The housekeeper was late. Those things just drop your scores, your NPS scores. Frustration goes up. And if these little things can go away, we're in business.
And I think that most of the guests won't ask for you, right? They won't ask what the technology that they're looking for. You need to understand their pain points and the value and what you can bring them using technology. So it's mostly about leading the guest, using technology without them even thinking about its technology, like we mentioned before, just about solving them the issue with the sand using the Roomba that would just say, wow, amazing. You just get out of the shower and everything is clean.
Yeah.
So seamlessly.
Yeah.
I think those are very important takeaways, and I like the idea of solving those small friction points to create a more seamless guest experience. I think we have time for one more question. Robert Reitnick asked, which luxury companies have created an engaging wellness experience that has made a change in the way the associates see the brand as their brand of choice to work for? For me, your best guest is your associates and the technology and experience you create for them every day.
Okay, me again. So during the pandemic, I was the vice president of spa and retail for Montage International. And I will tell you, during the pandemic, we went through the exercise that most companies went through in terms of furloughing people, some unfortunate layoffs, and then people just opting out of the industry for various reasons. But what we did during that time was we would have weekly newsletters from the executive team that went out to the properties. We did food drives. We did lunches and dinners for the families of the employees while they were out of work. And those things required coordination and a little investment, but the return was that when we wanted to bring people back, they came. Mm-hmm. And I think it's things like that, to put a bow on it maybe, that a machine can't do. right? And that a machine can't feel yet. And a machine can't intuit what a person needs when you're in a real trauma situation like we were in. So I think Montage did a great job in terms of handling that situation and how the outreach that we did, and willing to take it on the chin in some cases financially to keep people employed and to keep people engaged. And so I think that's who I was working for during the pandemic, so that's all I can really speak to. And I'm using that's a great example of something that a company did, but yes.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, gentlemen. Stephen, Patrick, David, thank you so much for your time, your insight. To close, we'd like to thank you all, those of you online and those of you in the audience, for joining the International Luxury Hotel Association's Inspire Conference and our panel discussion today. And we look forward to seeing you later at other discussions.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.